It was a bright Sunday afternoon when I first realized something was wrong. The smell of my mom's famous Sunday roast wafted through the house, and the clatter of dishes echoed from the kitchen. I was sitting in the living room with my fiancé, Adam, flipping through a bridal magazine, dreaming about the wedding we had been planning for almost a year now. For as long as I could remember, my parents had promised to contribute to my wedding fund. When I was little, it was always a casual remark, one of those when you get married, will help type of things. But as I grew older, it became something more concrete. We weren't rich, middle class at best, but they always made it clear they'd set aside money to help give me the wedding I deserved. When Adam proposed to me on our trip to Paris, something straight out of a fairy tale, I thought it was finally time to cash in on those promises. I had already started looking at venues, picking out dresses, and even picking colors for the invitations. The dream wedding was coming together. That day, Adam and I had been chatting excitedly about our plans when my phone rang. It was my mom. I answered it, expecting to hear her usual enthusiastic voice, asking if we needed any help with wedding planning. But something in her tone was off. "Sweetheart," she started, a bit too carefully, "we need to talk." I felt my stomach twist. I motioned to Adam, who was watching me with concern. "What's wrong, Mom?" Her voice wavered. "We've decided to use the wedding fund for something else." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She sighed heavily, and the words that followed hit me harder than I ever could have imagined. "Your sister's been trying to buy her first home, and we've decided to give her the $60,000 we had set aside for your wedding. It's more important right now, honey. We don't have the same amount of savings we once did, and this is a good opportunity for her." My mind went blank. My heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest. "What?" was all I could manage to say. "She's been working so hard, and this house is a dream come true for her." My mom continued, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to take away my future for the sake of my younger sister's house. "And besides, you and Adam can always figure something out for your wedding." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked at Adam, whose face mirrored the shock I was feeling. "But, Mom, that was my wedding fund. You promised me," I managed to say, my voice shaking. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, in the quietest voice, my mom said, "I know, I'm sorry, but I'm sure you'll understand. Family needs come first. You know how hard things are right now. Your sisters worked so hard for this." Tears started to sting my eyes, and I clenched the phone tighter. "What about my wedding? What about everything we've planned? You'll figure it out," she said, as if it was the easiest thing in the world. "You and Adam are capable. You don't need the extravagant wedding." And my chest tightened. How could she say that to me? How could they take away the one thing I'd been dreaming of for so long? I don't know what to say. I thought, "I know, honey," she interrupted, her tone shifting to a kind of guilt-laden calmness. "I know, but this is what's best. You'll have a beautiful wedding, and it'll be just as special without all the money, you'll see." I hung up the phone without another word. Adam reached over and gently took my hand, his grip firm, but he didn't need to say anything. His presence was enough to calm the storm inside me, even if just for a moment. He knew how much this meant to me. He knew how long I'd been planning, how I'd been imagining every little detail, every perfect moment. But that moment didn't feel perfect anymore. I stared at the wedding magazine in front of me, the smiling faces of couples on the pages mocking me. How could they not see how this was tearing me apart? I had always been the one to sacrifice, the one who'd been the understanding daughter, the responsible one who took on the family's weight, never asking for much in return. But this was different. This wasn't just a small disappointment, it was a betrayal. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, I wanted to throw the magazine across the room. Instead, I felt something colder, deeper, as if the rug had been pulled out from under me. The sense of security I had with my parents, the unspoken trust in the family, had shattered. Adam rubbed my back gently. "We'll figure this out," he said softly. "I know it's not what you wanted, but we don't need their money to make our wedding special. We'll do it together." I nodded, trying to keep myself together, but in the back of my mind, the question kept echoing. Why? Why did they think my sister's house was more important than my wedding? I had always supported her. I'd helped her through school when she struggled. I'd sacrificed my own desires to give her the things she needed. And now she was getting the house of her dreams, and I was left with nothing. It was hard to sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' faces, my mom's calm justification, my sister's smug expression when I mentioned it to her. They were all so sure of their decision, so convinced that this was the right choice, but in my heart I knew it wasn't right. I was angry, but more than that, I was heartbroken. How had I become so invisible to them? How had I gone from being the daughter they promised to support to someone whose dreams were so easily discarded? The next day, I called my sister, hoping for some kind of explanation. When she picked up, I heard the excitement in her voice. "Hey, what's up? I didn't waste time on pleasantries. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything about Mom and Dad using my wedding money for your house?" There was a moment of silence before she replied, "Oh, that I didn't know you'd mind. They said you'd understand." I felt a sharp pang of frustration. "Understand? Are you serious? You knew that money was for my wedding." "I mean, I didn't think it was that big of a deal," she said, her voice casual, almost dismissive. "You can always just cut back or have a smaller wedding, right?" The sting of her words hit me harder than anything my parents had said. She wasn't even sorry. She wasn't even aware of the impact of what they'd done. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how selfish she was, but I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath, reminding myself that my anger wasn't just about her. It was about everything that had led up to this moment. The years of putting everyone else's needs before my own, of always being the good daughter, always sacrificing my time, my dreams, my happiness. And for what? A house. A house that would never be enough to make up for the emptiness I felt in my heart right now. "I'll talk to you later," I said, my voice cold. "Enjoy your house." I hung up before she could respond. Adam and I sat in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say. The promise of a dream wedding, the one I had been building up in my head for so long, now seemed like a cruel joke. And the people I had trusted most, my parents, my sister, had let me down. In that moment, I realized something. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to see the pain they'd caused. And I had to decide how to move forward. I wasn't going to beg for my money back. I wasn't going to plead for them to care about me. I was going to build my own life, my own future. And when the day came, I would have my wedding no matter how small or how grand it would be. It would be mine, and I would take everything I had learned, every ounce of strength, and prove to them that I didn't need their money to be happy. Because in the end, the things that mattered most could never be bought. It didn't take long for the full weight of what had happened to set in. The shock was still fresh, like a bruise that hadn't had time to heal. But already the pain was starting to deepen into something more complicated. After the phone call with my sister, I'd stayed silent for days. The house felt suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in on me every time I walked through them. The space I'd once considered a home now felt like a foreign place. How could I be surrounded by people who were so willing to tear away my happiness for something that, to me, seemed so trivial? My fiancé, Adam, was as frustrated as I was, but he never said a word against my family. He loved me and was trying his best to comfort me. "We'll make it work," he kept saying. "I don't need a big wedding. We don't need their money. We'll have the wedding we want, no matter what." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the more I tried to move forward, the more the betrayal weighed on me. It wasn't just about the money, it was the years of sacrifice, the years of feeling like I was always second to everything else in my family, the invisible expectations, the way my sister was always the star, the one who deserved everything, while I quietly stepped aside to let her shine. And now, even my wedding, the one thing that was supposed to be mine, my moment to feel special, had been stolen from me. One Friday evening, my mom called again. "Sweetheart, we need to talk," she said, her voice full of that same careful tone I'd heard before. It was as if she expected me to just accept what had happened, to move on like it was a minor inconvenience. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. Inside, I was furious, but I had promised myself I wouldn't let them see me break down again. "Not now, not ever." She was silent for a moment, and then her voice softened. "I'm sorry you're upset, honey, but your sister really needed this. You know how much she's been struggling to find a place. You're strong. You'll find a way to make your wedding work." I could almost hear her wringing her hands on the other side of the phone. This was how they always were. Apologetic, but never really sorry. They never understood that it wasn't just about the money. It was about how they had made me feel. And my sister, she had no idea how deep this went, or if she did, she didn't care. I took a breath, letting the anger simmer. "I don't need you to explain it to me, Mom. I need you to understand that this isn't just about money. It's about years of giving, and now I'm left with nothing. I thought I meant something to you. You do mean something to us," she said, her voice defensive, "but family comes first. We're doing what's best for everyone." That phrase, "what's best for everyone," felt like a slap in the face. I wasn't everyone, I was me. I had always been the one who gave, the one who took care of things, the one who made sure everyone else was okay. But when it was my turn, when it was finally my moment to be celebrated, they tossed me aside for my sister's dream home. Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I fought them back. I couldn't let her see me cry, not after everything she'd already done. I had been her confidante, her support, and now this was how she repaid me. "I'm done talking about this," I said, my voice shaking with the quiet fury I was holding in. "We don't have to talk anymore, Mom. It's clear where I stand." I hung up the phone, feeling a weight settle in my chest. It wasn't just the money that hurt. It was the way my parents had taken my dreams so easily, as if my happiness didn't matter in comparison to my sister's. They had made a decision, and I had been the last to know, the last to be considered. The following days were filled with awkward silence in the house. My dad didn't say anything, but I could see the guilt in his eyes whenever he passed by me. He had always been the one I was closest to, the one who promised me that I could rely on him no matter what. But now he was just another face in the crowd, another person who had let me down. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, I needed closure, even if I had to force it. I walked into the living room where my parents were sitting, quietly watching TV. I took a deep breath and stood in front of them, arms crossed tightly over my chest. "You need to stop pretending like everything's fine," I said, my voice firm. They both turned to look at me, and for a moment, I saw something that resembled guilt flash in their eyes. My mom was the first to speak. "Sweetheart, we're just trying to keep the peace. This isn't about choosing one of you over the other. I didn't ask you to choose." I shot back, my frustration spilling out. "But you did anyway. You chose my sister's house over my wedding, and now you're pretending like it's no big deal. It is a big deal, Mom. It's a huge deal. You've completely ignored me, and all I'm asking for is some acknowledgement of how badly this has hurt me." Dad cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "We didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart. But your sister needs our help right now. Her house, I don't care about her house. I interrupted, my voice cracking with the weight of years of bottled-up resentment. She gets everything, doesn't she? She gets the new house, the new life, and what do I get? Leftovers. I've always been there for all of you, and now you treat me like I'm the one who's being selfish. The room was heavy with tension. My mother's lips pressed together, and my dad avoided eye contact. I saw them both flinch, but still, they wouldn't apologize. They wouldn't admit the hurt they had caused. Instead, they just sat there, quiet. I'm not selfish, I said, my voice lower now, calmer but no less hurt. I'm just asking to be seen, but you don't see me. I've spent my life being what you wanted me to be, doing what you asked. I've always been the good daughter, but this was where I needed you most, and you weren't there. My dad shifted again, his hands resting on his lap. You have to understand this is all temporary. Things will calm down. Your wedding will still be special, even without the money. We'll still be there for you, even if it's not in the way you imagined. His words felt hollow. They didn't understand. They didn't understand how this went beyond money. This was about trust. This was about love, and they had broken both. I stood there, my chest heavy, not knowing what else to say. I realized in that moment that I had expected too much. I had expected them to make it right, but they were never going to see it from my side, were they? I don't think I can do this anymore, I said softly, more to myself than to them. I don't think I can pretend like everything's okay, not when it's not. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the room. The silence followed me as I went upstairs to my room. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my heart racing in my chest. I was exhausted from trying to keep the peace, exhausted from being the one who always did what was expected of her. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I knew something now. I couldn't keep trying to please them anymore. I had to let go. I'd taken the first step by pulling away from my family, but the consequences of that decision weren't as simple as just distancing myself. The emotional toll was heavier than I expected, like trying to escape a gravity I'd been living under my whole life. Every call, every text, every casual mention of family events felt like a reminder of the rift that had grown between us. Adam and I began to plan the wedding of our dreams, but it was different now. It wasn't the dream I had once imagined, with thousands of flowers, a fairy tale venue, and a long train trailing behind me as I walked down an aisle of soft rose petals. Instead, we were creating something small, intimate, and meaningful. We both agreed that no matter how much my family had hurt me, we would build our future together. Not with their help, but on our own terms. But even as I said those words to Adam, I couldn't shake the emptiness that lingered. The day after I confronted my parents, I spent the morning on the phone with wedding vendors, trying to scrape together what little I could afford without the $60,000 I had expected. My heart broke a little more each time I had to explain the situation, but every "I'm sorry" from the vendors was a tiny affirmation that I was doing the right thing, getting married on my terms, without the weight of their expectations. The absence of my family felt like a void that was growing with each passing day. I was alone. No matter how much Adam tried to soothe me, I felt the sting of rejection from the people I had always turned to. Every time I passed by my phone, I thought maybe my mom would have texted me an apology. Maybe my dad would have called, his voice full of regret. But there was nothing, no outreach, no gesture, just silence. I started staying later at work. I buried myself in projects, becoming more and more consumed by the deadlines, the meetings, the late nights. I wanted to forget about everything that had happened, to lose myself in the rhythm of my career, to trick my heart into thinking that work could fill the empty space my family had left behind. At first, Adam was supportive. He'd encourage me to go out with friends, to take time for myself, to relax and not think about the wedding or the family. But even in those moments of relief, there was a quiet nagging in the back of my mind. What did they think of me? Was I selfish? Did they believe I was ungrateful? Every time I picked up the phone, I imagined seeing a message from my sister. Perhaps something innocent like "Hope you're doing okay." But it never came. She had her new house, her new life, and from all outward appearances, she was content. She didn't need me anymore. I, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. The growing distance days turned into weeks and then months. By the time summer came around, Adam and I had already moved into a small apartment that we had renovated ourselves. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and that was enough for me. The process of turning that blank space into our home gave me a sense of accomplishment, of control. I'd never had that before. My parents didn't reach out, but I didn't really expect them to anymore. I had stopped hoping for their acknowledgement, stopped waiting for them to come to me with an apology. I had grown weary of that. I was tired of expecting them to see me, to see my pain. Instead, I focused on building something real, something that was mine, something that couldn't be taken away. In the midst of all of this, there was still the nagging thought at the back of my mind. What about my wedding? We had planned a small ceremony with only a handful of close friends. The venue was small, the decorations simple, but it was perfect. Adam was excited, I could tell. He was thrilled to see me happy, but there was still a part of me that couldn't escape the shadows of my parents' betrayal. I would look at the tiny silver bands we had chosen for our wedding rings and wonder if, deep down, my parents would have supported our decision, or if they would have seen it as just another downscaled plan, something not quite as good as what I had deserved. The night before the wedding, I sat in front of the mirror in my little apartment, applying makeup and smoothing down my dress when it hit me. The family I had spent my entire life building my identity around was no longer the family I knew. They weren't the ones I turned to for support anymore. They weren't the ones who celebrated my victories or shared in my defeats. I wasn't sure when it happened exactly. Maybe it had been happening for years, and I had just been too blinded by love and loyalty to see it. But now, sitting alone in my room with the soft hum of the fan and the quiet rustling of the dress, I realized something fundamental. I had built my life without them. The sisters' struggles, meanwhile, my sister's life wasn't as perfect as she had imagined. For all the excitement about her new home, the dream she had worked so hard for, it was quickly turning into a nightmare. I heard about it through mutual friends at first, then from my mom, who reached out after a long silence. "Your sister's house, well, it's not exactly what she thought it would be," my mom said hesitantly one evening on the phone. "There have been issues with the plumbing and the heating systems malfunctioning. They're behind on the mortgage payments." I felt a strange mix of vindication and guilt. I didn't want to take pleasure in her misfortune, but I couldn't help but feel a little justified. Maybe this was karma. Maybe this was fate's way of reminding her that life didn't always go as planned, no matter how hard you tried to push forward with what you wanted. At the same time, part of me felt pity. I knew what it was like to struggle with something you worked hard for, to face disappointment and frustration, wondering where it all went wrong. But I also knew that her house had come at the expense of my own happiness, my own moment in the sun. I hadn't been the one to ask for $60,000 or to force my parents to choose. She had. I could have felt bad for her, could have reached out, offered my support. But in the end, I didn't. I had learned something important during these months of silence. You can only give so much to people who aren't willing to give back. I had always been the one to sacrifice, the one to give in the name of family. But now, the scales were balanced. I had given enough. The wedding day, the day of the wedding, arrived with the kind of quiet beauty that had always eluded me in my fantasies. It wasn't the grand, lavish affair I had dreamed of. There were no huge floral arrangements, no $1,000 cake, no elegant venue. But there was Adam. There were the friends who loved me, who had stood by me during the hardest parts of my life. And there was me, whole, at peace, and finally free. I had done it. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the betrayal, I was walking down the aisle with my head held high. And as I stood there, with my vows in hand and the warmth of the sun on my face, I realized that the distance between me and my family wasn't just something physical. It was something emotional. Something I had built myself. I wasn't just standing here as their daughter anymore. I was standing here as me. This was my moment. The wedding was beautiful in a way that was entirely my own. We stood in a small garden with a handful of our closest friends, each one there for us in a way that felt more meaningful than any guest list I could have created with $60,000. The vows were simple, but they were heartfelt. Adam's face was the only thing that mattered, the only thing I needed in that moment. The rest, my family, the hurt, the confusion, wasn't invited. The days after the wedding passed quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. The absence of my parents and sister no longer felt like a gaping wound. It felt like a choice I had made. I had spent years tiptoeing around their needs, their demands, their expectations. But this life, the one Adam and I had started, was ours. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval. That doesn't mean I wasn't still hurting. I was so hurt. But I had learned something important in the months leading up to the wedding. I didn't need to carry that pain anymore. I could let it go. I could choose my own happiness, even if it meant doing it without the people I had once believed would always be there. The unexpected call, it was nearly a year after the wedding when my mom called again. This time, the tone of her voice was different. Softer, less defensive, less calculated. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice filled with something I couldn't quite place. "Can we talk?" I was surprised, to say the least. I hadn't spoken to her or my dad since the wedding. The silence between us had stretched on like a cold, empty void, and I had convinced myself that it was better this way. I didn't want to open old wounds, but despite the hesitation that washed over me, I agreed to talk. I was sitting at my desk at work when the call came through, and the sounds of typing and phone calls in the background only added to the tension I felt in the pit of my stomach. Adam wasn't there. He was working late at the office. It was just me and the silence. "How's everything going, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, my emotions at bay. She hesitated, then let out a sigh. "I know we haven't been in touch much, and I'm not sure how to say this, but I've been thinking about everything lately, about what happened between us." I sat up straighter in my chair. This wasn't something I had been expecting, not after everything that had happened. "Okay, what do you want to say?" She paused again. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm really sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I let you down, and I can't tell you how much I regret that." I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't expected this. An apology, a real one. For so long, I had waited for them to understand what they had taken from me, what they had cost me. But hearing her words, I wasn't sure I even knew what to say. "Mom," my voice faltered. "I don't know what to say. It's been hard, really hard. I don't think you understand the pain that all of this caused." "I don't," she admitted quietly. "But I'm trying to. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I realize I was wrong. I should never have treated you the way I did. You deserved better than that. I failed you, and for that. I'm sorry." A lump formed in my throat. This wasn't the conversation I had imagined. It wasn't the angry, bitter exchange I had been preparing for. Instead, it was a moment of vulnerability from the woman who had always been the pillar of my life, the person who had promised me everything and then taken it away. I felt the weight of my own emotions pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her that it was too late for apologies, that it had taken too long for her to finally see the truth. But another part of me, one I didn't expect, was listening. I was hearing her, really hearing her. "I'm sorry I hurt you," she repeated, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make it right. I want us to heal." It was an offer I never thought would come. For months I had convinced myself that healing was something I would have to do alone. That my family, despite the promises they had made, would never truly understand the depths of their actions. But now, sitting in the quiet of my office, I realized something. I didn't have to carry this anger forever. Maybe this wasn't about them making it right. Maybe it was about me finding a way to let go. "You hurt me, Mom," I said softly. "But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward." "I know," she said. "And I understand that. I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight, but I hope one day we can rebuild what we lost." The unlikely reunion, a few weeks later, I received another unexpected message, this time from my sister. It was a simple text, "Can we talk?" I almost didn't respond. The thought of confronting her, of having that conversation, stirred up so many emotions I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But I also knew something now that I didn't before. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first learned of the betrayal. I had grown, I had healed, and I wasn't going to run away from this conversation like I had once run from my pain. I called her back. Her voice was tentative, nervous, but there was something new in it, something that sounded like regret. "I've been thinking about everything," she said quietly, the words heavy in the air between us. "About the house, about what I did, and I'm sorry. I was selfish, and I didn't see how much I hurt you. I was wrong." Her apology felt different than I had expected. It wasn't about justifying her actions or brushing them off as no big deal. It was real, raw, acknowledging what I had known all along, that she had taken something that wasn't hers to take. "I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness," she said, "but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for how I treated you, for how I let you down." I sat there, stunned for a long moment. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive them both? I had spent so long blaming my family for my hurt, and I had spent so much time burying my anger, thinking I was justified in holding on to it. But now I was seeing things differently. Maybe this wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about healing for all of us. "I've been hurt," I said finally, my voice soft, "but I'm not going to carry that hurt anymore. I'm learning to let go." It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't the happy reunion I once imagined. But in that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes you have to let go of the people who hurt you in order to make room for the people who can help you heal. And sometimes healing comes when you least expect it, when you've finally stopped fighting and are ready to move on.